Thank you. So the series of lectures will be on basically the Lurot problem, or the stable version of the Lurot problem. So today I am going to discuss classical results, classical invariant, or classical and less classical invariant. And we will see from that discussion that in dimension 3 up to very recently, only one invariant, very tiny invariant, was used to detect a counterexample to the stable Lurot problem. And starting from tomorrow, I will explain a new technique, a new source of invariant, which will show that even in dimension 3 there are plenty of stable birational invariants that can be used to test stable irrationality and then address the stable Lurot problem. So let me recall what it is. So I will consider a smooth projective variety over algebraically closed field. In fact, after a while, K will be presumably C, but of course the main difference is between characteristic 0 and non-zero characteristic. And I say that X is unirational if, so let's say that the dimension of X is n, if there exists a dominant rational map from some Pn to X, and in fact immediately you see that you can do n equal n, capital N equal n, just by replacing your P capital N by linear subspace in general position. So in that case, this dominant rational map will be of finite, generically finite. And then the other important definition is that X is rational if there exists a birational map between Pn and X. And the last definition is that X is stably rational if X cross PR is rational for some integer R. So very obviously, you get the chain of implications that rational implies stably rational, and it implies that unirational. So this implication is known to be strict, but I want to discuss this. What I want to discuss is the Lurot problem. So the original formulation of Lurot problem is the converse to this implication. So is a unirational variety. Rational, and the stable version this is asked at whether unirational variety is stably rational. And of course, as I said, the implication from rational to stably rational is strict, and it's as a consequence, it's much harder to disprove the second question. So one comment that I would like to make about these definitions is that, well, I started from a smooth projective variety, but in fact, all the definitions, they use only the function field of the x. So I could have formulated the question in terms of just the function field of x, whether it is contained in a purely transcendent field, or for unirational, or whether it becomes purely transcendent after adding variables, etc., etc. But the point is that to address this problem, it's absolutely essential to have a smooth projective model, and I will explain how we use a smooth projective model to exhibit interesting birational or stable birational invariants. So this question, in fact, we know already the answer. So it's known since. Okay, so well, for the case of dimension 2, it was known much earlier. So dimension none greater than 2, characteristic 0. Then the answer is yes. It is a unirational surface is rational. So this is a yes for this problem. So a fortiori yes for this one. And starting from a dimension at least 3, the answer is no. And so I am going to describe quickly the three different methods that has been used to address that problem. And it turns out that among these three methods, the first two do not address the stable version of the stable Lurot problem, and only the third one addresses it with one tiny invariant, which is the Artin-Mumford invariant that I will describe. And then I will start from this Artin-Mumford invariant, describe the generalizations, etc., etc. So let me be more precise on this. So the first result was due to Clemens and Griffiths. So they proved that so we are in a characteristic 0. But then this has been also done later on in non-zero characteristic by Murray. So a smooth cubic trifold in P4 is so let's say so is not rational. Here, as I said, so their result is in characteristic 0, and then it has been proved later on by Murray. Maybe characteristic should be not 2, or maybe okay. So yes, on the other hand, it's very clear, it's very classical also that a smooth cubic trifold is unirational, and the construction is the following. So you start from a line in your X. So it is known that there is a surface of a line. So your field is algebraically closed. So you choose a line, and then you choose any point on the line, and then you choose a tangent vector to your X. So you draw the P1 passing through this point and with this tangent vector, and it will intersect the cubic, of course, along this point counted with a multiplicity 2 because the line is tangent, and then there will be a third intersection point. So doing this, we constructed a rational map, which is in fact dominant from P2 bundle over this line to the X. So this belongs to, this is, if you like, P Tx restricted to delta, the choice of a tangent vector, and this maps to the general point here. So this way we constructed this unirational parametrization, which can be shown to be of degree 2. Okay, so now the Clemens-Griffiths proof relies on a criterion which is specific to dimension 3. So a priori, that does not address the stable irrationality of the cubic threefold, which is still a completely open problem. And the method they use. So to study a stable irrationality, you have to study equivalently irrationality of X cross any PR. So you need to have criteria for irrationality working in any dimension. So their method does not work only in dimension 3. But in the third lecture, I will come back to the ingredients they introduce, which are essentially the geometry of the intermediate Jacobian, which is an abelian variety, and the Abel-Jacobi map. And I will explain how more stable birational invariants can be extracted from these geometric ingredients. Okay, so that was for Clemens-Griffiths. The second was due to Iskowski and Manid, and they proved that a smooth quartic threefold in P4 is not. So maybe I'm not sure if let me do this is not rational. And here the situation is a little so similar in the sense that they do not address stable irrationality, but the criterion they use exists in any dimension and works in any dimension. So the criterion is the birational automorphism group, which in this case they prove to be finite, in fact isomorphic to the automorphism group of the quartic threefold. Generically, it's just trivial. And of course, if your quartic threefold if your threefold was rational, its birational automorphism group will be the Cremona group. It will be enormous. So this is the criterion, and in fact, this works in any dimension. So the people, Puklikov and then Defernex, generalize this in any dimension. So when I say generalize, so you consider, for example, hypersurfaces X in Pn with a degree of X equal n. So this is the last case where your X is a Fano, and the question makes sense. But still the criterion does not work a priori. I think it is an interesting question. A priori, it does not apply to stable birationality. And the problem is that, as I said, to study whether your X is stably irrational, for example, you will have to show that X cross PR is not rational for any R. So if you want to apply this criterion, what you need to do is to study the birational automorphism group of X cross PR. And to my knowledge, this has not been done, and that would be really very interesting. For example, to prove that the birational automorphism group of X cross PR is the same as the Cremona group of PR, essentially. That would be enough, because that would show that it does not act transitively on your X cross PR, and would show that X cross PR is not rational. But to my knowledge, this kind of things have not been done up to now. And the third method is one which, the only one, for a long time, that was the only example known, where the stable version of the Lurot problem is solved. So so I am not going to. So let me take some time to describe and explain the method. More generally, what one wants to do in order to construct, to exhibit varieties which are stably irrational, is to exhibit stable birational invariant, as in the general talk of my lectures. So what do I mean by this? So I say that X and Y, let's say again smooth and projective, are stably birational if X cross PR is birational to Y cross P to the S for some integers. Okay, and so a stable birational invariant or a stably birational invariant property is something so that defines an equivalence relation. Which is in fact generated by equivalences of two types, namely by X is equivalent to X cross PR and X by birational equivalence. Okay. And so a stable birational invariant is something which is constant on each stable birational equivalence class. So let me give an example. The first example that might seem not very useful. This first example, because in characteristic 0 it will be trivial for a unirational variety, but in fact it has played an important role recently via the work of Totaro. So if you consider L0 of omega x, say tensor K. K is not good. Okay. For X smooth projective, is a stable birational invariant of. So this is what I said. The problem that we are considering concern only the function field of your X. But if we want to study it, we will need you need to know to know at least one smooth projective model. So the it's omega x, it's omega 1x that I take to the tensor L. So the proof is quite easy. So we have to show that it is invariant under replacing x by x cross PR. But the point is that here the omega is of x cross PR. It's P1 upper star omega x plus P2 upper star omega PR. And so when you take the tensor product of that, you will get that H0 of omega x cross PR tensor L. It is a direct sum where you will have a tensor product of, so maybe I should set L1 plus L2 equal L of H0 of omega x tensor L1 tensor H0 of omega PR tensor L2. But the point is that they are all zero for L2 positive, and finally, in this sum, you get only this one, which is the remaining. So this gives you the invariance when you replace your x by x cross PR, and then you have to show the birational invariance. And the proof is very standard and easy, but I want to give it because that will be exactly the same proof that will be used to show that an ramified cohomology that I will introduce later on is birationally invariant. So what we use is the following. So if you consider H0, the restriction map, okay, maybe I should put U here. So I consider the restriction map to Zariski open set. So maybe it's G upper star, and here G is the inclusion of a Zariski dense Zariski open set. Okay. This map is injective. This is trivial, of course. It's a restriction to an open set. And the second point is that the same map is an isomorphism if the codimension of the complement of U in X is at least 2. This is by normality or Hartog in the complex analytic setting. So it's just a section of a locally free sheaf. And so now this is the proof that this is a stable birational invariant works as follows. So I tend to be stuck on small square. Okay, so let me try to finish this proof on this blackboard. So this, so now the last point, and this is exactly here that you use the fact that your x is x and y are smooth and projective. It's more projective that is used here. The point is that if you have a birational map like this, or just a rational map, then there exists U contained in X with a codimension of X minus U in X at least 2, such that here you have a true morphism. And this is exactly here that we use the fact that we are working with projective varieties and not. So now we're doing when we have this. So you have your file like this. So you have this U, phi U. This is now a true morphism, so that gives you phi U upper star. The last point that we use is that these objects are contravariant. So phi U upper star from H0 of omega y to the tensor L to H0 omega U tensor L. And similarly, now you do the other way. You consider V contained in Y such that here you will have your phi minus 1 to X, and here it's a true morphism. Okay, so you will get this. And then you say that this is the same as 0 omega X tensor L. So by this composition, you get the morphism, and then you do the other way. You will get phi V minus 1 per star from H0 omega X tensor L to H0 omega Y tensor L. And you conclude that the composition of both is the identity, and similarly for the other, using the injectivity here, because it is true when you restrict to open set. Okay, so this is a model of proof that will be used later on. It applies exactly similarly to an ramified cohomology. So that statement is useless for the Lurot problem in characteristic 0 because in characteristic 0, unirational variety, smooth projective variety, X has H0 omega X tensor L equals 0 for L non-negative. This is due to the fact that if you have this rational map, dominant rational map from projective space to X, you can use this method to pull back injectively the pluriform on X to a pluriform on projective space, and then they vanish on projective space. But what is used here is the injectivity of the pullback, which is true in characteristic 0 because we have a dominant map, so the differential is. Sorry. So the point is that in characteristic 0, dominant rational map, unirational parametrization, will have a generically differential of maximal rank. So the pullback map will be injective, and that will force this vanishing. But in characteristic non-zero, there are examples due to Kolar. I should say Kolar Totaro. Where so there are mildly singular Fano hypersurfaces. Fano, it's this condition that the degree is smaller than or equal to the hypersurfaces in Pn of degree d smaller than or equal to n. Mildly singular Fano hypersurfaces, X with it's even worse. It's not only pluriforms, it's actually differential forms. I think it's with a non-zero. So here I put the X. It's in fact the X tilde. The X tilde is something which is again close to Bifano, and this is on the desingulation X tilde that you get this form. Okay, so that was the first example. That will, I think, come back later, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And now let me speak about the Artin-Mumford invariant. Here it's the desingularization of this X. It is mildly singular, so to make sure it's a case where the differential forms extend over the desingularization. So here I'm going to be over C and use Betti homology, but in fact this invariant is really very algebraic. You could define it by purely algebraic means, and certainly in any case replace Betti homology that I'm going to use with étale homology. And in some sense that will be maybe better, because after a while I will explain that this invariant that was presented by Artin and Mumford as a very topological invariant has really meaning in terms of unramified cohomology. And the beginning of unramified cohomology, it's a Brouwer group. So, but let me do it in the very easy or down to earth way that Artin and Mumford did. So now let's assume that X is over C, and what I will consider Betti homology of X with coefficient in A. So that means that I consider X of C equipped with Euclidean or usual topology. Okay, so that gives me a certain topological space X1, and you take the Betti homology Hi of X1 A. So this is what I call my Betti homology, so the Artin-Mumford invariant is the following. You consider the torsion of the third homology group, Betti homology group of X. So it is also called the topological Brouwer group. So the lemma is that this group, this group is stable birational invariant of X, and again it's crucial to say that X is a smooth projective. Okay. So let me prove this. I will give a very elementary proof using resolution of singularities. In fact, it turns out that it is possible to, and it's important because this invariant is also defined in non-zero characteristic, to show that this invariant is a stable birational invariant without using this resolution of singularities, but that uses a detour through unramified cohomology and rather deep result. So I don't see an elementary proof of that fact without using resolution of singularities. So proof. Again, if you replace X by X cross PR, the cohomology of X cross PR it's just the cohomology of X Z plus H1 of X Z. Okay, you have to multiply here by the generator of H2 of PR. And this space has no, this group has no torsion. No.
Le deuxième, c'est un projectif X.
No. 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 It's H1 of X that you pull back to X cross PR and then multiply by the generator H of... No, it's a Q-net decomposition for the cohomology of the product. Okay, so now this one has no torsion. It's a general fact of topology that is easy to prove. And so you conclude that H3B, the torsion of this group is the same as the torsion. And then so that shows the invariance under replacing X by X cross PR. And then you have to show invariance under blow up. Invariance under birational map. So it's here that I am going to it's really very elementary if you have a resolution of singularities. So we use, and even you can use a weak factorization that make it still easier. So you have your X, which is birational to Y, and you factor your map via a sequence of things like that, where all the maps appearing are just obtained by sequence of blow-ups. So this way, so of course we want to show that the invariant does not change when you pass from X to Y. It suffices to show that it does not change when you pass through the intermediate steps. And finally, you just need to show the invariance under blow-up. But that works exactly the same way as here, namely, so for now we have to see what happens under blow-up. So suppose that you have a Z in X, or a smooth Z that you blow up. You get this X tilde Z, and then you know that H3 of X tilde Z is the same as 2 upper star of H3 of X Z. And you have a copy of the H1 of the blown up locus. Which is mapped to the cohomology of here, just by here you pull back to the exceptional divisor, and then you push via the Gysin morphism from the exceptional divisor to this. And again, this one has no torsion. And so you conclude that by taking torsion, you get the same group. Okay, so this is this is one proof. You can also, using a little more functorialities, a little more tricky invariant, prove it not using the weak factorization, but just the existence of resolution of singularities. So there is a trick which allows to do that. And as I said, in fact, there is also a proof without using resolution of singularities. So, and now the main result of Artin and Mumford solving negatively the stable Lurot problem in dimension 3 is the construction of a unirational trifold which has a non-trivial Artin-Mumford invariant. So they do it as follows. So they consider quartic double solid. Okay. So it is something which is so it's a double cover of P3 ramified along a quartic surface. And concretely, to construct such an object, you will consider it as a hypersurface in, so it's L. Okay, so it's the total space of O of 2. That means that this is the spec of the algebra plus over D of OP3 of minus 2D. On this L, when you consider the algebra of function, you see that there exists a natural section Y. So, okay, so, well, this is the one which comes when this starts with, so it's of course like this. So you have first OP3, and the next term is OP3 minus 2. When you twist this OP3 minus 2 by O of 2, you get O, and that section will give you this Y. And the double cover, so you start from a quartic surface defined by F equals 0, and your double cover is defined by the equation Y squared is equal to F. So this is a general quartic double solid. And what do Artin and Mumford? That they choose a spectral equation F0 with the property that the surface, the quartic surface defined by this equation, has 10 ordinary double points, but there are not any. So in a spectral position, I'm going to explain in a minute what is this spectral position. So now, if each time you have an ordinary double point for your surface, maybe call it S. Okay. An ordinary double point for SF0 will produce an ordinary double point for your XF. Because here an ordinary double point for your surface, it's locally you will have an equation x2 plus y2 plus z2. I mean your equation f in local holomorphic coordinate will look like this. And when you consider the corresponding equation for your double cover, you will just add something like this. So it's y2 maybe. Well, so we'll get an ordinary double point in dimension 3. Okay, so and then so you can consider the resolution of singularity just by blowing up this 10 ordinary double point, and the theorem is that the XF tilde, which is easily shown to be unirational, has a non-trivial. So let me say a word about this spectral position, because it's absolutely essential in the computation. The condition which is required by Artin and Mumford is the following. So you consider your quartic surface. It has these 10 double points. And they should be arranged in the following way. So you choose. So it's one double point. And then you can project your surface to P2 from this double point. And then it becomes a double cover. So you blow up your surface at this point, and it becomes a double cover. So necessarily ramified. Along a sextic. And the condition on the position of the node is as follows. So the condition is that the sextic is the union of two cubic curves meeting transversally at 9 points. And here the nodes of you want that this intersection is transverse. Okay, stuck. You want the intersection to be transverse. You get 9 points, and these 9 points will be responsible for the 9 other missing double points. So the sextic here is not any sextic, because, in fact, it has to have a conic in P2, which is everywhere tangent to it. This is because your surface is projected like this, so you have this exceptional conic. It will project to a conic in P2, and it has this property of being everywhere tangent to the ramification locus. Okay, so that's the condition, the notion of spectral opposition that appears here. So, and what is I think for more than 40 years, no other stable birational invariant for unirational trifolds was known. And as I said, I will show later on that in fact there are definitely others, many others. I want to finish by explaining, I want to devote the rest of the lecture to unramified cohomology. So let me show first sort of a next degree generalization of this Artin-Mumford invariant. In fact, the Artin-Mumford invariant is the beginning of a series of stable birational invariants which exist in any degree, with some, of course, vanishing restriction according to the dimension. So, an example of a next invariant, which is, as I said, the second of this series. It's the following group. So let's assume that X is over C, but again, that's really just to use Betti cohomology instead of étale cohomology. You can consider some work that I did with Colliot-Hélène. Okay. So you consider the following group. Betti cohomology with integral coefficient of degree 4. And then you quotient it by the subgroup of algebraic classes. Okay. This is not a stable birational invariant, but we are going to take the torsion of this. So here, this is the group generated by classes of cohomology classes of subvarieties of codimension 2. So, in fact, this group is it is contained in the group of integral Hodge classes. That means that the cohomology classes that you get from algebraic subvarieties of codimension 2, when you consider them as cohomology classes with complex coefficients, they are of type 2,2 in the Hodge decomposition. This is what we denote by the set of Hodge integral Hodge classes of degree 4. So this one is contained in this one. So in fact, you can remark that the torsion, in fact, here it's contained in the torsion of it's the same. The torsion of the group of Hodge classes. So this group measures the defect of the integral of the Hodge conjecture with integral coefficients for x. So we know that there are examples due to Atiyah and Hirzebruch, for example, Collat, etc., where this group is non-trivial. I should mention that the Hodge conjecture for rational Hodge class predicts that this group is torsion. So this one. So this is okay. So in other words, this invariant, in principle, it is the same as this one, and indeed that is the case when the Hodge conjecture holds for rational cohomology classes of degree 4 on X, and if X is unirational, then the Hodge conjecture for the rational Hodge classes of degree 4 on X is true, holds. This is a result which is due to Conté and Murray, and which has been generalized by Bloch-Srinivas later, where they replace unirational by the fact that the CH0 group of X is trivial. Okay, so the conclusion is that we have this invariant, and the lemma is that the group, as I said, for unirational, the varieties, this one and this one are the same. So the group so that maybe I could put directly this one. So E is stable by rational invariance. So, and in fact, this group has been not directly, but indirectly used by Colliot-Hellen and Oilenguren. They prove that there exist 6 folds X, which are unirational. They are constructed as quadric bundles over P3 with this group Z4 of X different from 0. And recently, this has been Schreier proved the same with with 4 folds. And then we cannot go to lower dimension because I had proved that this group, Z4 of X, is trivial. If dimension of X is 3 and X is, for example, I need uni-ruled or Kx is trivial. Okay. So, that gives another invariant. So the proof works exactly, means the ad hoc proof works exactly the same as for the Artin-Mumford invariant. For example, to show invariance under doing cross PR, you consider the Hodge classes of degree 4 of X cross PR. In fact, this is the same as the Hodge classes of degree 4 on X, plus, and then you see the Hodge classes of degree 2 on X. And then maybe there is another term. But Hodge classes of degree 2 on X, integral Hodge classes, we know that they are algebraic. This is by the Lefschetz theorem on 1-1 classes. So the analog of the previous, in the previous proof, I use the fact that there is never an torsion in H1, and the analog for for proving this is simply the Lefschetz theorem on 1-1 classes, which will show that in lower degree we cannot have such invariant. Okay. So now I want to say, the point is that this is not at all what Colliottelen and Jean Guren are doing. What they do is that they work with unramified cohomology. And in fact, later on with Colliottelen, I identified this invariant, this concrete invariant, geometric invariant to unramified cohomology. So let me say something about unramified cohomology. So again, I'll do it in the setting of working over C with Betti cohomology, but you should do it in each one. I can show his favorite cohomology theory and work with it. So I consider my I have this Xn, which is X of C with usual topology, and on the other hand, there is X zar, which is the same space, equipped with the Zariski topology. So the identity on points gives you a continuous map. And you can do the Leray spectral sequence. And this has been done by, this is a fantastic paper by Bloch and Gus. The Bloch-Gus spectral sequence. So now what does this spectral sequence? It provides you with, well, of course, of F, of course, you choose A, which will be a group of coefficients. That will give you a constant shift on your Xn, and at the end, you want to compute your Betti cohomology here via this spectral sequence. So you get Hi of A, which is defined as RIF lower star A, so it's a shift on X zar. So it's the shift, concretely, this is a shift associated to the pre-shift. To the pre-shift, U associates HIB of U. And so you will have the spectral sequence, which starts with a E2 term Okay, so you have the E2PQ term of this spectral sequence, and that will converge to HP plus Q of X on A. And the definition, which is due to Colliot-Helen and Ojangeren, is I think that Bogomolov also introduced this definition independently. That Hi unramified of XA is the H0. So this is A2 0 I term of this spectral sequence. So let me just state, I'm not going to prove anything, state what I wanted to state. Maybe if I have time, I try to do it tomorrow. The theorem is that the unramified cohomology groups are stable birational invariant. Okay. What is interesting is that if A is equal to Z, all these groups, in fact, vanish for I positive and I unirational. This is absolutely non-trivial. The point is that to prove this result, you need the Blocchetto conjecture proved by Vojevodsky. That is saying that if you consider these shifts, Hi of Z have no torsion. So, and then you understand how you can do. You show that for X unirational, these groups are of torsion by using the pullback to projective space, and then you conclude with this hard result to conclude that they are zero. And the last point is the tree, is that the group for X unirational. The group Z4 of X that I mentioned is in fact H3. The third unramified cohomology group with coefficient in Q over Z. So we need, as I said, torsion coefficient. And similarly, in fact, the Artin-Mumford invariant. It is the previous one, so it's this one. Okay. So in fact, the two invariants that I exhibited, the geometric invariant, they were the beginning of a series of invariants that exist in any degree. This is unramified. Here it's Q. It's torsion. So for X unirational, this invariant that I introduced here, it is in fact here. And this is the way Colliot-Helen and Ojangeren prove their result. It's via exhibiting non-trivial unramified cohomology class. And then with Colliot-Helen, I reinterpreted this. So this is exactly our contribution with Colliot-Helen. Okay, so I'm going to stop here.
Are you planning to explain that theorem next time?
Yes, I would like to. In principle, I should have devoted one quarter of hour to that. I would like to explain you this is very beautiful. It means proving that it is, for example, a birational invariant. This is a consequence of the main result of Bloch-Hugus, namely the Gersten-Killen resolution of the sheaves Hi, that gives you immediately an interpretation of this group, really as a cohomology with no residue. It's the same as taking a cohomology of the function field, that is at the generic point, with no residues along any divisor. And when you see this, it becomes obvious that it satisfies these properties that I mentioned for differential forms: injectivity under restriction to Zariski open set, and an isomorphism if you restrict to an open set whose complement has codimension at least 2. And so that's it. So I plan to do that, but no time to.
For the quartic double solid, could you take the Kummer surface that has 16 double points?
I am not sure it works. I mean, it's a delicate issue related to when you consider a K3 surface, so with the nodes, you blow up the nodes so that you have the classes of the exceptional divisors. So here we have 10. Plus, you have the polarizing class, H, and the two torsion in the H3 of Xz, it's related to the fact that these classes are not independent modulo 2 in the cohomology H2 of the surface. So maybe yes, maybe that would also work for the. What I want to say is that these phenomena they are discrete. You have this tiny invariant, so that will, if you deform the surface keeping the nodes, you will keep that relation. But how to say? You cannot say in general 10 double points that will produce that relation. No, you need to have this relation modulo 2. And then how it will degenerate to the Kummer surface is not clear to me.
Any more questions?